half over the next 4 years. For more on how the president plans to get this done, I'm joined by Democratic Representative Joe Sestak of Pennsylvania, who serves on the Small Business Committee. Joe, I want to start, Representative Sestak, by asking you, how are we going to really get this done? How are we going to spend all of this money and cut at the same time?
I think there's a bit of optimism by the goals of President Obama. I'd like to be upfront about that, but we must begin to do it. I think that the first issue he has to address is health care, Medicare, Medicaid. That's the real ball that's coming down the bowling alley at us. Following that has to be Social Security. Now, the president has talked about a number of means, such as the war in Iraq dwindling down, such as addressing Medicare Advantage, where those who are in private plans getting their Medicare, actually with government pays 12 to 13% more. Let's temper that down. But the issue here is, how quickly can you really do it? If you remember, back in 1937, President Roosevelt from 1933 to 1937 had driven unemployment in a depression from 27% down to 9.5%, and then he raised taxes. A payroll tax, the first in our history, and a corporate tax. My caution is this: we need to get a pay-as-you-go government. But if you, even on the rich, all of a sudden, if we're not out of this recession, begin to raise taxes in 2011, then you can have a very similar hindrance to our recovery. So I caution that doing it is absolutely critical. I voted for pay-as-you government when I came down here. Both we need a mandatory discretionary spending. But let's get out of this recession first, and so I caution, let's watch before we raise taxes on anyone.
Representative Sestak, to get out of this recession, it feels like some desperate things are going to have to go on here. You are the highest-ranking member in Congress with a military background. You were a Rear Admiral. There's talk about really taking a serious knife to the military budget. Do you think that's wise, and would you be for that?
I do think we actually need to redo how we do our procurement. Look, we have this tyranny of optimism in the defense industry and in defense. I know. I ran the Navy's $70 billion warfare program. When I sat back and looked and ran the numbers 4 years ago, we could afford not the 313 ships where the Navy says they need twice as much procurement, going up from $11 billion 2 years ago to $22 billion per year. We could afford probably 240 to 260 ships, which is more than sufficient if one of the things that Iraq hindered us from accomplishing is achieved. And that's a transformation to what is called a knowledge-based military. Imagine, Charles, if we had known that Saddam Hussein was going to go into Kuwait because we had the satellites and the means to know, then we might not be there today. You know, and so my issue here is, what are we procuring? We're still measuring our military by how many, rather than capability. The entire commercial world has changed to a knowledge-based industry, and the military has to do that transformation. So if he does it right and transforms the military, he will actually give us a better military than our 1,313 ships that can't communicate with one another. Right. And so that's the transformation that's actually needed.
All right. And let's talk about going through this budget line by line, because that is what was advertised. Now, we have these big issues, defense, Medicaid, Medicare, which you just brought up. Is it realistic that there are even enough cuts line by line, and do you think that it's possible? And if you were president, where would you focus if you were going through this budget line by line?
I don't think that you will get the types of change in behavior and the new types of approaches just by going line by line. Will some savings be reached? Without a question. But what really needs to be done is, let's take Medicare. Right now, it's fee for service. If you're sick, you go in, the doctor takes care of you. There's no incentive in the entire system for preventive care. Imagine if someone was found, as we passed a bill 2 years ago, but never got through the Senate, that everybody reaches 65 years old, Medicare age, gets a free colon rectal, diabetes, bone density, etc. All those exams. If you find out that they have diabetes and you make sure they're taking their medicine, they don't go in years later to have their egg amputated. Will we pay for a prosthetic, the infection that probably occurs, a wheelchair, etc.? That's the type of systematic change, which I think is why President Obama is saying, I'm going to do a 10-year budget, because you don't see those great savings until a few years down the road with some type of initial investment. If he doesn't do that, we will never reform health care. Line by line, looks good politically. It won't give you the systemic changes, as I even just mentioned previously in the Defense Department.
Representative Sestak, you sit on a small business committee. I haven't seen anything that's been presented from the White House so far that helps small business, the backbone of this country. What's going on there?
I think we have to truly do what you just brought up. Wall Street Journal has a wonderful article, editorial on it today, about how do you spur entrepreneurship. If tax incentives have to be given to anyone, it's to small business. The Bush administration unfortunately cut the SBA, Small Business Administration budget, by 40%. We need to reinstitute the programs and actually be giving subsidies to entrepreneurs, where they know that potentially you could have a new entrepreneur and he pays no payroll tax till he gets that company going. 70% of all jobs are created by small business. It's why I fought hard to get a small business community. And that's where we need to get, as we get through this recession, we need to stimulate our economy to create jobs with small business incentives. And by and large, it is the government giving them subsidies and or tax breaks. That's where we've really got to do it.
Representative Sestak, thank you very much this morning. Really appreciate it. And this programming, though, folks, Fox Business has full